everyone, it's Clarice and today I'm going to give you an update on my current to be read pile. As you may or may not know, a bit over 2 months ago I put up a video about my TBR pile and about my plans to reduce that TBR to 0, which I will link on the screen and or down below if you haven't seen that yet. And a big part of my plans to reduce my TBR to 0 involved constantly monitoring my TBR and my progress. Since I filmed that video on September 8th, I had planned to update you every 8th of the month. But currently, if you look at my channel, I don't have an update for last month, though I actually put one up, which you may have seen, but I had to take it down due to personal reasons. So today I'm going to actually update you on all the books that I read from my TBR, books that I gained from my TBR, and that sort of thing over the course of the first 2 months of my challenge, I guess, to reduce my TBR to 0. I will leave a counter at the bottom of the screen so you can see how my TBR count is changing. And so without further ado, let's start the count at 51. On September 9, I read How to Get Filthy Rich in Rising Asia. On September 10, I read The Complete Mouse. On September 11, I read They're Not Like Us Volume 1 and also bought Trip to Tagaytay and Dwellers. On September 12, I read Trip to Tagaytay, as well as Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian and Dwellers. I also bought the 5th season. On September 16, I bought To Be or Not to Be. On September 23, I read Instructions on How to Disappear and decided to give away Pandemonium, as well as The Knife of Never Letting Go. On September 24, I read 11 Doctors, 11 Stories. On September 25, I read True Volume 1. On September 28, my birthday, I was gifted Battle Royale, and also on my birthday I was gifted Kare Kare Comics, Black Sad Volume 2, and Black Sad Volume 3. But those 3 I gifted to myself. And if you're wondering about the birthday book haul, it'll probably happen really late because life happened and so we haven't gotten around to getting my other books from Customs yet. So I don't know when that'll happen, but it'll happen. On October 2, I read Wounded Little Gods. On October 12, I received Arcadia from Katie Loves to Read, which I was super excited to get. On October 23, I decided to give away my copy of The Book Thief. And if you're wondering why I'm doing this, I will explain later. On October 29, I read Kare Kare Comics as well as Black Sad Volume 2, which is called Black Sad: A Silent Hell. On November 5, I read Inside Out and decided to give away Armada. And lastly, on November 6, I read The Lies of Locke Lamora. So those are all the books that I read, bought, was gifted, decided to give away, and those sort of things over the first 2 months of me trying to reduce my TBR to 0. So a few things that I want to change, things that I learned, points that I want to make based on my experience this first 2 months. First is I decided that I want to change my goal from reducing my TBR to 0 to reducing my TBR to 5. It made sense to me to make my goal TBR of 0 because there's no reason that when I want to read a book that I can't borrow it from the library or buy it as an ebook first. And you don't need to buy ebooks ahead of time. You can just buy them when you're about to read them. So I didn't really see the point of having a TBR greater than 0. But something that I didn't really take into consideration was gifts. Because my birthday happened in those first 2 months and I didn't want to discourage people from buying me books as gifts because books are my favorite type of gifts. And I like how the gift is the book as well as the recommendation of that book. And so again, I don't want to discourage people from giving me physical books as gifts. I also don't want to read those books immediately after I get them. So I want to leave the TBR size of 5 as sort of a buffer for books that I may receive as gifts. Next insight that I could get out of this month is that there were still books that I bought that I regretted. The one that I definitely regret buying is To Be or Not to Be. I mean, the concept is cool. It's Hamlet as a choose your own adventure book, so I have nothing against this book. It's just that I bought it on such a whim because I'm not even a Shakespeare fan. I haven't even read Hamlet, and so I don't know why I bought this. I'm probably going to have to read Hamlet first before I read this if I want to get like the full experience, and I'm not even super excited to read it. So I kind of regret buying this. Actually, I really regret buying this. I do plan to get to it eventually, but there was no reason I had to buy it the moment that I did. Another thing that I kind of regret buying is the 5th season, though I don't really regret buying it because it's a book that I've really been wanting to get to. But at the same time, the main reason I bought it is because it was a Kindle daily deal for that day. and I don't really like the idea of me becoming a slave to Kindle sales. It's not necessarily the book, but just the idea of me buying something just because it was on sale on the Kindle store that I kind of regret. My next point is, I guess, something that I was glad that I was able to do this month is give away some non-TBR books. And it might seem weird that I mentioned them because they didn't really affect the count in any way, because they didn't reduce my TBR or increase the size of my TBR since they were books I'd already read. But even though it's not related to my goal of reducing my TBR size, it is related to the greater goal of eventually getting a bookshelf that's only filled with books that I love. And so there was no reason for me to keep these books if I didn't love them. First of all, Pandemonium. I remember significantly liking this series when I read it the first time. I was like on that YA dystopian phase. But I also remember just preferring the first book so much more than the other two books. If there's any book in that series that I wanted to reread, it was the first one. So there was no reason for me to hold on to this second one when I had no intention of reading it ever again. Next, I let go of The Knife of Never Letting Go. I shouldn't have said that, no. I don't even have it anymore because I already gave it away. I like this book, but not as much as everyone else seemed to like it, and not enough for me to feel any pull to continue reading this series, because I don't have any motivation to continue reading this series. It's not a book I needed to hang on to just because everyone else loved it, or because I loved the way that the spine looked and I was imagining how nice it would be to have the whole series together with all those nice spines. So I didn't want to keep it anymore. Next is the one that might make the least sense, and that is The Book Thief, which, as many of you may know, is one of my favorite books. It was actually the first book that I ever considered to be my favorite. So why the hell am I giving it away? I won't get into details, but I just no longer want to hang on to this particular copy of this book because of personal reasons. To cheer myself up, I decided that the moment I get the opportunity to, I'm going to replace this with the 10th anniversary edition of The Book Thief, which looks amazing, and I'd love to have that on my shelf. But this copy I have to get rid of. And the last book I decided within the last 2 months to give away was Armada, which I hung on to mainly because I loved Ready Player One so much, but I was actually so greatly disappointed by this book. I was also kind of hanging on to it just because I think it's a pretty book, you know, like inside it has that thing, and then the best part of it, this map of the ship. But I'm not gonna hang on to a book I don't like just because it has a nice inner dust jacket. You know, that's a stupid reason to keep a book. Overall, I'm really happy with how I've been progressing with reducing my TBR so far. The progress is slow, but it's still progress. You know, I was still able to reduce my TBR size by, was it 5 books over the first 2 months of my project, even though those 2 months including my birthday and vacation and like really stressful times which I could have cured by spending money on books, which I didn't do, and so I'm proud of myself for that. As long as I'm continuously making progress, I know I'm eventually going to get to my goal. So do you have any particular TBR goals? And if you do, what are they and how are you progressing with them so far? Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video.